Hola, hola, hello. Welcome to another episode of Spiritcraft, the podcast where we explore ways to nurture your soul and unleash the magic within. I'm your host, Marta, and today we're diving into the topic of intuition, specifically how to trust your inner voice. Have you ever had a gut feeling you couldn't explain or a sudden insight that just felt right? That's your intuition speaking. We're going to explore what intuition really is, how to recognize it, and how to start trusting it more in your everyday life. But before I get started, thank you for all the feedback on last week's episode. I am so happy that you enjoyed the meditation, and I wanted to let you know that I plan on creating many more. I'm currently working on a guided meditation for sleep. You can find all the meditations in the meantime on my website, on my YouTube channel, and on Insight Timer. Feel free to let me know which other meditations you would like to have, and I will try to make them. I will leave the link to all of those platforms on the show notes. Okay, there's something else that I wanted to share with you. I want to make you all aware that I have a monthly and sometimes twice a month newsletter that you can sign up for. Every month I share a card for the month, and those in the newsletter are the first ones to find out about any upcoming news. But there's no Substacks, there's no Patreons or any membership fees for the newsletter. I do have a subscription model on the website where you can get access to a more detailed monthly collective reading as well as weekly collective readings. I will leave details for all of that as well in the show notes. And of course, we can connect on social media, which mostly means Instagram or Threads, which are both the places to find me. Once all of that is out of the way, let's get into the topic of intuition. What is intuition? Well, intuition is the inner knowing that is not backed up by logic or any reasoning. We have the sense that we just know something, even if we're not really sure how we know it. Many times we ignore our intuition because it rarely seems to make logical sense. However, intuition actually taps into deeper wisdom. It might be pulling from our subconscious and past experiences, or even pick up on subtle cues that our conscious mind is overlooking. Intuition is not really magical. It is that unconscious mind which is very quickly going through all of our past experiences and all of our knowledge. And our brains can register information before we're even aware of that information. We are not consciously aware that we're doing it. And I find that fascinating, isn't it? You might have heard expressions such as trust your gut or having a gut feeling. Sometimes we might feel that something is off or something doesn't add up, or we have a hunch. Well, having a gut feeling is actually not entirely off because our digestive system, it contains about 100 million neurons. That is an enormous neural network. It is like a data superhighway. It's essentially, yes, our second brain. So you can imagine how powerful it is when processing information. Our subconscious is great at recognizing patterns. We cannot analyze every single detail of every situation in our daily lives because we would not have enough time, or we might end up not doing anything, basically. Instead, our brain is constantly working in the background, trying to recognize patterns, processing information, and using known responses based on past experiences. So, intuition can work in many ways. It goes from that gut feeling to a strong sense of yes or no, or even vivid dreams. But we all make decisions differently. Some people need to analyze all the facts before they can choose an option, and others might go with what feels right. Intuition is one of the many ways of thinking and processing information. And while some people might seem more intuitive than others, someone who might be making decisions based on facts and someone making decisions based on gut feelings or a hunch are using extensive data points and facts. The main difference between them is that the first one is aware of that information and has consciously learned it, while the other one has taken said information without being aware of it. In our spiritual journey, being able to tap into our intuition is an asset that we must nurture. If you're not connected to your intuition, don't worry. We will look at some ways in which we can make that connection a bit stronger. The way our intuition lets us know that something is going on is through signals. These intuitive signals can appear as physical sensations, like having a tight feeling in your chest. They can show up as repetitive thoughts. They can be dreams, or even that sudden urge to call someone. The problem with recognizing that your intuition is sending you a message lies in the fact that intuition doesn't shout. It usually whispers. So if we're not in the habit of listening out for messages from our intuition, we may miss them when it actually speaks to us. Quiet listening works wonders for connecting us to our intuition. Think of it this way. When we are trying to pinpoint a low sound that we're not sure where it's coming from, we tend to switch off all other sounds around us, we ask people to stay silent for a moment, and we really listen. Have a think of whenever you feel like your body is reacting to people or to situations. Where do you tend to feel those sensations? Is it a physical feeling? Is it a sense of knowing? Or is it something else? For me, it mostly presents as knowing. I get this nagging feeling that I should choose A instead of B. And even when my rational mind is telling me to do something different, my sense of knowing keeps pushing into that direction. My gut tends to get very stressed when the stakes are high, so it would be easy for me to confuse intuition and anxiety. But to me, intuition almost feels like a magnet that is pulling me towards one of the options. It usually starts like a barely noticeable feeling, and if I ignore it over time, it will become loud and powerful, almost like the message is trying to burst out of my skin or something. And I don't know, it's very hard to explain, but it's this sort of weird buzzing urge that I get inside when I'm ignoring that intuition message. But anyway, that sort of thing only happens when I have a big decision to make and my intuition is telling me something, but I keep avoiding that option. I will feel unsettled and weird until I acknowledge the message. Of course, over time, I've learned to trust my intuition more. So even if I decide against its advice, I acknowledge the message. Most of the time, my intuition is right, but it is not infallible. After all, when we make all of these unconscious decisions in a split second, sometimes we get the information wrong. So if you're not quite sure about how connected you are with your intuition, or you don't trust that intuition message, how can you build that trust? Building trust in your intuition takes practice. The main reason why we ignore our intuition is because we are afraid of getting it wrong, or we are afraid of the consequences of choosing the path we're being nudged towards. For example, something that is going to change your life. If you're not used to trusting your intuition, and suddenly you're wondering whether you should leave your stable career for the unknown of a startup, or whether you are in a happy marriage and you should stay or not, or any other big life-altering decision, of course it's going to feel terrifying. Intuition works a bit like a muscle. The more we use it, the better we become at it. And the same way that we train our bodies, we will start small, lifting light and running short distances. We build it up over time. So we should do the same with our intuition. The key here is to start small. The way we start small is by using our intuition for small and important decisions. What do we eat today? Which outfit to wear? Whether to call a friend or which route to take. Keep track of your hits and regularly reflect on the outcomes. And who would have thought, but journaling is a great tool for doing this. After all of this, you will begin to notice some patterns, and you're going to get better at managing your feelings when you're uncomfortable, and over time, this is going to build confidence in your intuitive abilities. However, it's important, like I mentioned very briefly earlier, to know the difference between a gut feeling and fear. Fear can create feelings and sensations that might confuse us. At first glance, they might look very similar to how intuition works, but these sensations might feel more like a rejection and not wanting to take certain steps, or maybe we feel tense. It might feel like we're trying to force ourselves into a situation that our body might be trying to pull us away from. Have you ever tried hugging or petting a cat or a dog that definitely did not want to be petted? How they try to get away from us? That's how I imagine that fear situation. When intuition is at work, things might feel like the right path, like we're being guided, or things are the right fit for us. Now, intuition can function as a positive or a negative message, and fear can also be at play here, for example, when our intuition is guiding us away from danger. Take this example, and since you know a bit more about me, let's go with some fairy tale or spooky scenarios. Imagine you are walking alone in a forest that you've never been to before, and there's no civilization for miles. You're really deep in that forest, and you can only hear birds singing, the rustling of the leaves in the wind, or the crunching of your feet stepping on dead leaves and twigs on the ground. You want to have a nice, warm walk before going back home. At some point, you come to a fork in your journey. To the left, everything seems normal. There's a path in the forest. The vegetation is still lush and alive, the sun is shining between the trees, and you are sure there's a small creek running through somewhere near. To the right, the vegetation seems much thicker, and the path seems to disappear just a few steps in. Despite it being a sunny day, that path looks darker and less full of life. Birds don't seem to be nesting on the trees to the right, and the air coming from that area seems chilly. There's a rustling in the bushes, and you're not quite sure how big the animal making the noise is. This is a very simple, silly example. And of course, your reaction is going to vary based on your personal experience. So unless you're really into spooky stuff, or you are an explorer or an adrenaline junkie, chances are your intuition would nudge you towards the lighter path on the left. There will be a sense of fear, or at least discomfort, leading you away from the dark path on the right. This is going to be fear and intuition working together. The path on the right might be perfectly fine, but something inside of you might be telling you that you're on your own, somewhere unfamiliar to you, and the path on the left feels safer. However, fear can also leave us stuck in a situation, even if your intuition is telling you to move. What if I fail? What if it isn't as good as I hope it would be? Better the devil than you know. Those are the kinds of thoughts that might cross your mind when fear is taking over, not your intuition. You might be feeling like it's time to move, to leave a situation behind, to make a change, but you remain in place for fear of the unknown. So, as you can imagine, it is very important to get to know your body and how your intuition sends you messages so that you can make the difference between fear and intuition talking. It is very possible to improve your powers of intuition. Strengthening your intuition involves comparing actual situations and outcomes with the intuitive decisions you make and using this feedback to get better at it. However, just because you're good in one area doesn't mean you'll be good in others. You might be great at intuitively knowing when someone is not a good person, but you might be terrible at knowing how to make a decision intuitively. Have you ever flipped a coin and just as the coin was up in the air, you knew exactly what you wanted, or even after it's landed on the choice that you actually didn't want? That's similar to how our brain might make decisions in the split of a second, especially once an option has been removed. Instead of using a coin, why don't you try a rapid fire test? You can list all the questions on a paper or even ask someone to help you. Try to answer those questions without thinking much. Get that time pressure in. Other ways of strengthening our connection to our intuition is to pay attention how your body feels. If you regularly ignore your body when it's signaling hunger, tiredness, or even stress, you'll find it even harder to hear it when it's guiding you in your journey. Practice mindfulness if that helps, but becoming aware of your body's signals will help you better understand its messages. Do you always feel it in your stomach when you're nervous or uncomfortable? Does being safe and happy make your body relax? Or maybe being safe actually makes you hungry? Whichever way your body works might be clues into how your intuition communicates with you. Something I haven't spoken about in the podcast yet is dreams. Our dreams can be full of messages from our higher self. And when we're not very attuned to our intuition during waking hours, intuition might choose to shout at us in our dreams. There are countless books about dream interpretation, and some symbols are widespread across cultures. At the end of the day, your intuition and your subconscious is going to use symbols that mean something to you, so pay attention to patterns and the types of dreams that you dream about. And on this note, I might be able to bring a dream analyst as a guest into the podcast, which I think would be a fantastic opportunity to learn more about dreams. So if you have any questions that you would like to ask them, you can email them at podcast@spanishbruja.com or use the comments if you're listening through Spotify. There is something very important that I want to mention. Stress doesn't help our intuition. If you have no time to stop and catch your breath, you won't be able to listen to that whisper. One of the best ways to strengthen your intuition powers is to slow down and manage your stress levels. Now remember, intuition is not perfect or fail-proof. Sometimes we get it wrong because we are human and therefore we're not perfect. But that shouldn't scare you away from listening to your intuition and your subconscious self. And sometimes it's okay to say, I hear you, but that doesn't work for me right now. The key is to acknowledge the message, not ignoring whatever your intuition is trying to tell you. There are different ways in which you can use intuition in your everyday life. For example, when you're faced with decisions like choosing between job offers or deciding on a new project, just tune into your gut feelings. Ask yourself which option feels lighter or more aligned, rather than just weighing your pros and cons. And if you're not sure, you can pretend to live each choice. You can imagine yourself as if you had already made that decision and see how it feels, how it sounds, how it tastes and looks. Just imagine yourself living that life. And after a day or two, you can imagine yourself as if you had taken the other choice and see how that one feels. And you can actually see in your own body the sensations that each of the choices make you feel, and that will be your intuition telling you which way to go. You can also use it to navigate relationships by using your intuition to sense the underlying energy in different interactions. You've probably been in a situation in which something has felt off during a conversation or a meeting. You should trust that feeling and explore it further because you might be picking up on some signals that you're not consciously aware of, but nonverbal communication is very important in how humans communicate, and we pick up all of that information subconsciously, so your intuition might be telling you that there's something else that you're missing. Finally, intuition plays a huge role in keeping us safe. There's been situations in which I've definitely felt very uncomfortable and uneasy in a certain place or even around a particular person. And trusting those signals has helped me make safer decisions. So if you are ever in a situation in which something is telling you to get out, something is telling you is not safe, then just trust your intuition. It is better to be wrong and get out of that and nothing happens than to have ignored that message and then regret that decision. Now, I want to say that intuition is never going to replace logic. They both work together. It's not either or. You can use logic to gather information and then use intuition to feel out the best way forward. Because logic might say that one job pays more, but intuition pulls you towards the role that feels more fulfilling. You might want to check both sides of the coin before you actually decide. You can definitely rely on intuition when the facts are unclear or when you're making decisions that are going to affect your emotional or spiritual well-being. And you can use logic for data-driven tasks like budgeting or technical work. The way that I make big decisions in life is by checking all the pros and cons of a situation, and I make lists and I think it over and I compare and I wonder. And at the end of the day, I always go with my, I'm going to call it gut feeling. I might be thinking about it for a month if it's a really big decision, and I might rationally have come up to a conclusion. And then at the last moment, I realized that's not what feels right. And I actually feel like I need to choose something different. That's the way I do things. Recently, for example, I've been making a very big decision. And as you know, I use my tarot cards for everything. It was very interesting because when I asked my cards how I should be making this decision, the message that came out was that there were many pros and cons and many things to consider, but ultimately I had to make that decision with my heart, not my brain. So it was going to be a decision on what felt right for me, no matter what the actual data told me. I have briefly mentioned some exercises in passing during the episode, but now I really want to get into them. Before you do any exercise to strengthen your intuition or even on your day-to-day life when you're trying to use your intuition more, it is very advisable to practice regular mindfulness so that you can feel more connected to yourself and to your intuition. You can use any of the following as a warm-up before any other intuition exercises. You can use mindful breathing to tune in, and for example, before checking in with your intuition, you can start with a minute of mindful breathing. And remember, we did that breathing guided meditation not that long ago, and you can find it on Insight Timer on my website and on YouTube. So you can focus on your breath, noticing each inhale and exhale, and make sure that this is calming the mind and it will create a quiet space for your intuitive voice to be heard. You can do body scans. You can essentially do a very quick body scan meditation, noticing any sensations or feelings in different parts of your body. And this is going to help increase awareness of subtle ways in which your intuition signals you, like if there's any tension or any lightness. And finally, you can spend a few moments observing your surroundings with full attention. Mindfully notice details such as colors, sounds, or textures without judgment. This practice is going to help you increase your overall mindfulness, and it's going to make it easier to recognize those messages and cues as they arise. You can choose one or more than one if it feels right, so that you will feel more open to the signals coming from within and around you. After those, some of the exercises that you can do to strengthen your intuition are things like a daily intuition check-in. So each morning you can take a few moments to sit quietly. You can close your eyes and take a few deep breaths and ask yourself a simple question. What do I need to focus on today? Or what's the best way to approach my day? Notice any immediate thoughts, feelings, or images that come to mind without overthinking them, and write them down. You can also do an exercise for intuitive decision making. Essentially, for small decisions like choosing what to eat or which route to take, just stop for a moment and ask yourself which option feels right. Go with your first instinct rather than overanalyzing. Just pay attention to how you feel after making that decision, because this is going to help reinforce that trust in your intuitive choices. And finally, keep an intuition journal. In here, you can record instances where you felt that gut feeling or that hunch, and note what that feeling was, what decision you made, and the outcome. And over time, this is going to help you recognize patterns, and it's going to help you build confidence in your intuitive skills. Okay, let's wrap up today's episode. So we've explored what intuition is and how to recognize its signals, and then I've added some practical ways to start trusting your inner voice. Remember, intuition is like a muscle, so the more you use it, the stronger it gets. Start small. Pay attention to how your body and your mind responds, and give yourself grace as you learn to trust that inner guide. Your intuition is a powerful tool for navigating life's challenges and making decisions that align with your true self. This week, take a few moments each day to listen to that quiet inner voice. Try a small decision, guided purely by intuition, and see how it feels. If you're up for it, give those exercises a go. Do at least one of them each day of the week, and let me know how it goes. I would love to hear about your experiences, so please share them on social media or in the comments or email me. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to subscribe, to leave a review, and share it with someone who might benefit from learning more about their intuition. Thank you for joining me on this journey of self-discovery. I'll see you next time on Spiritcraft. But in the meantime, believe in yourself.